Hello and welcome. This is the Bits vs. Bytes podcast. I am your host, Amen Grigic, and today I have a very special guest from Gitlab. He is Sytse Sijbrandij. He's the CEO actually at Gitlab. So welcome, Sytse.
Thanks for having me.
So I was wondering, could you tell a little bit about your background and how Gitlab came about?
Yeah, I studied management science. I always had companies, and at a certain point, I was working as a Ruby on Rails developer, and I saw this project called Gitlab, and I thought it made so much sense because every single tool I used as a developer had an open source version. And then Gitlab was the first time I saw collaboration software where you could contribute back to it. So I was intrigued, and I started Gitlab.com, the SaaS version of Gitlab.
Okay, and so Gitlab already existed before you started, or how does that work?
Yeah, at that point, when I saw it for the first time, it was a year old. It was started by my co-founder, Dimitri.
Mm-hmm.
And he made it because he needed it himself. He was working at a company of a few hundred people. He wanted something like this, but he had to have a self-managed installation. There was no budget. And he's like, how hard can it be? I'll just make it for myself. And by that time, after the first year, 300 people already joined that effort and contributed back.
And could you tell a little bit about what you try to provide as Gitlab as well?
Yeah, so Gitlab started as a version control for software, but by now it's a single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle. It means that everything you need from managing and planning your projects, all the way to packaging, deploying, configuring, monitoring, securing, and defending your applications in a single application. So we allow people to just get a Kubernetes cluster, get GitLab, and you can do all your software development in a single application, which makes it a lot easier and a lot faster to collaborate.
Yeah, and because you said when you joined, it was a year old. When was this? What kind of the time period was where I'm thinking about?
Yeah, so in 2011, Dimitri started GitLab. In 2012, I started Gitlab.com.
Mm-hmm.
In 2013, Dimitri sent out a tweet, I want to work on GitLab full-time. And I hired him. 2014, we incorporated. 2015, we joined Y Combinator. So we moved to the US. And since then, it's grown. It's now 2019. There are 470 people at the company, and over 2,200 people contributed to GitLab.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. I can only imagine how that must be for you guys that started it to see that grow out and in this kind of a project, right? So I was wondering about something else. Is that what I've seen is that it's interesting that you took a lot of avenues, right? So it probably started out as an open source project, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, it started out as an open source project.
Yeah.
And we tried many different business models.
Mm-hmm.
The one we currently have is open core. So there's additional features in GitLab aimed at managers and directors and executives, and that you pay a monthly subscription for.
Yeah, and you, when you joined, as you said, you started kind of Gitlab.com, which is kind of the SaaS version, right? So where someone can take it hosted.
Yep, I did. By the time Dimitri sent his tweet, I want to work on GitLab full-time, I realized that most of the demand for GitLab was actually from people running their own software. The software process is so important to companies, and so many other systems depend on it, that it's typically something people take or larger organizations take in-house.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of people asking to help with that. And when Dimitri sent that tweet, I want to work on GitLab full-time, I took him up on his offer. We agreed on a monthly wage, and I went to the local Western Union money office to wire that from the Netherlands to the Ukraine. They were like, do you know this person, or is this someone you met over the internet? There were lots of scams going on at the time. But I made the wire, and we were in business.
That's crazy. Because did you know each other for long? Because I can imagine when you kind of start up in this kind of a way that it sometimes helps to know that person for a little while. So did you know each other long, or?
That was not the case for us.
Crazy.
The only thing was when I started Gitlab.com, I sent him an email like, I'm going to try to start a SaaS version of this, and I hope you're okay with that. You're not going to get anything. That was basically the message. And he sent an email back like, that's totally okay. It's open source. Go for it. I'm glad you're making GitLab more popular. So that was a very open source view of him to take, and that was our first interaction.
Yeah, and what's also interesting to me is that the you offer kind of both ways. So you offered the whole SaaS version where you can just take it hosted and then that's it, and also have that open source. Was that kind of the strategy from the beginning, or was that something that just came naturally because you saw that you wanted to provide to more companies than just the ones that you were targeting at that moment? What was the reasoning behind that?
When I started, I thought that the SaaS would make all the money.
Sure.
I was inspired by companies like Salesforce. So I assumed that everyone was using SaaS, and that was the logical thing. So I thought that would be a big success, but it wasn't. There was a lot of people trying it, but most large organizations insisted on keeping it self-managed so they could hook it up to all their other systems easily. Yeah, so that was a surprise to me, and we started doing that as well.
Yeah, that makes sense because in some cases it's also because of the data, right? So maybe they're a little bit hesitant to share that data with some external party or whatever. I can imagine that was also one of the avenues, right?
Yep.
And we're using GitLab also, so that's cool to hear for you. I think as well is that we're using the kind of self-hosted version. What I've noticed is that the frequency of updating is really high in my opinion, especially for this big of a project. So I think it's like monthly or something like that, right? Or even faster than that. Could you tell a little bit about that? Was it kind of a strategy that you came up with, or your co-founder came up with to keep that rolling? Because that's really hard in an environment you are in right now. So could you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Dimitri released the first version of GitLab on the 22nd, and then the second month he was like, well, I can hit the 22nd again, and that's become a thing. We never missed one, and we're coming up to 100 releases in a row now on the 22nd.
That's sick.
And it's there's a value we have. It's a value of iteration. So instead of taking more time to build the same thing, just reduce scope and get something out there so that you can get feedback from your environment. And that reduces a lot of the cancellations, the coordination problems that are inherent to software development. We stick by that value. So every month it ships, and there's a cutoff date, and the release train never stops. And we've always been able to get a new version out with a lot of extra features. Also helped by people from the wider community who contribute more than 100 features every month.
Yeah, and how do you keep that up, especially when there's a lot of people contributing? So how does that work? Who does like the checking of the things? Is that still your co-founder, or how does that work?
By now we have multiple maintainers. So those are the people responsible for an individual piece of functionality. But we also, for example, have merge request coaches who try to get your merge request over the finish line so that it even is ready for review.
And are those people from the community, or those people from GitLab themselves?
The merge request coaches and the maintainers tend to be from GitLab itself, or GitLab the company.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's your product still. It's not like it's out in the open and that's it. I mean, it's still a product that you actively push on your own platform, but also to clients as well. So I can imagine that's the case. So
we'd love to have merge request coaches from the wider community, but it's a lot of work, and it's very hard for people to be able to afford so much work next to their day job.
Yeah, because it especially when it's a bigger project, it's kind of hard to get into. So I was wondering about that as well. Is that, say for instance, people are wanting to contribute and stuff like that? Is that also something that those coaches help with, or how does that work?
Yeah, for sure. So those coaches, in general, if you commit your contribution, it gets triaged. The relevant PM and the relevant engineers see it. But some of them language, like there's a lot of, our definition of done is pretty extensive. Look, you gotta have documentation, you gotta have working tests. There's code style guides. So a merge request coach kind of helps you get over that hump. And sometimes even the merge request coach takes it up and finishes it for someone. They push additional commits and helps it gets over the finish line.
Yeah, what was interesting to me is also something that you mentioned a little bit earlier as well, is that you don't see it anymore as software for a code repository, right? It's the whole package, the whole thing is geared towards getting your product to the finish line, right? So the whole integration and the Kubernetes and stuff like that. So could you tell me a little bit about why that was so important to you? Because you could have just stuck to doing the code repository on itself and that's it, right?
Yeah, so that was not obvious to us. At a certain point, we got a new GitLab runner. GitLab runner is a part of our GitLab CI functionality, and someone made a way better one, written in Go instead of Ruby, and it was amazing. So I said to this person, Camille, thank you. We'll make this our official one from now on. And by the way, do you want to work for GitLab?
Yeah, that's crazy how that works.
And he did. He joined, and he's been prolific. And at a certain point, he says, well, we have these two different applications, GitLab version control and GitLab CI. Mm-hmm. Should we combine them into one application? And Dimitri explained to him, obviously not. It's like these applications are really well integrated. Like they have all the APIs to talk with each other. They're custom made they only work together. So they're custom made to fit together really well. So it's not needed. And this is not what's standard in the industry. He convinced Dimitri, they came to me and I said, obviously not. Like the Unix philosophy, many small sharp tools that are composable. That's how things should be done. He said, well, if you don't believe me that it's better, at least believe me that it's more efficient, because right now we're maintaining two Rails apps with pretty similar menus, templates, dependencies. Let us at least combine that. I'm like, well, efficiency is one of our values, so I can't say no to that. So we did it. Turns out he was completely right. It was such a better experience for our users to not have to bounce around between different applications, to not have to log in again, to see the relevant information right there. Because it was a single data store, you're not looking either at version control or at CI. You can combine information from both. And we felt like we unlocked a secret not because we don't tell anybody, but a secret because other software producers are unlikely to follow us. And we doubled down on that. And by now we expanded the scope, not just version control and CI, but everything you could need in a lifecycle. Like a recent thing we added is like feature flags, and there's a Docker container repository, and all these things in the single application. And it's so much easier. You don't have to pass credentials around. You have a single concept of who user is and what they can do, and you can surface the relevant information at any point.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because it's the reason why I'm asking this is that a lot of people say, okay, you should focus on what you're good at and just focus your product on that as well, right? So look at your product and say, okay, we're good at code repositories, we're good at doing all the things around it, so the pull requests and stuff like that. But I see that it's working also from our vantage point. For why one of the reasons we picked GitLab actually was that we saw that I was tired of switching applications. That was mainly the thing. So I was tired of course, they're integrated and I can get everything to work. And when I merge a pull request, for example, it will of course kick off the job in some other product or whatever. But I like the kind of having the overview of everything in one go, right? So everything in one screen. And I know that that's maybe that's one of the things that you get back as feedback as well. Is that something that you hear as well?
Yeah, with GitLab, you benefit from the DevOps best practices of over 100,000 organizations using GitLab. So all those people, when they miss something, they will add it to GitLab. So you don't have to figure out, oh, I should set an extra hook here to do this, and then I have to update this app, and then I need to install this. No, people will add it to GitLab, and it will just get released. If you want to deploy a static website, great, just set it. GitLab pages. You want to deploy a private website? Great, someone just contributed private websites for GitLab pages. Like, you don't have to go into your Nginx config and add that yourself, which is like 2 days of work. It just works out of the box.
Yeah. One big thing, sorry to interrupt you. So one big thing that I've noticed there is that what I've noticed is you added the kind of Kubernetes support as well, right? So you've said, okay, how did that come about? Because I can imagine you had options to deploy to other clusters and stuff like that, but why Kubernetes, for example?
Yeah, we got lucky. So after we did CI, there was more and more CD functionality, continuous deployment, continuous delivery. And then we started looking at like releasing and configuring and monitoring. And we were a bit daunted, like we'd have to adapt to every single cloud, every single provider. And then Kubernetes came along and kind of made one API for the entire infrastructure layer. So we jumped with joy, and we jumped right on that. And right now in GitLab, you can just add Kubernetes clusters to your project or to your group or to your instance, and GitLab will know what to do. It will know how to build your code, how to run your tests, how to check the performance, how to check the quality of your code, how to run security tests. It will do review apps. It will just know these things. Just give it a Kubernetes cluster and GitLab will be happy. And so that's been a big game changer for us. One thing I want to come back to is focus on what you're good at.
Yeah,
so it took a while to figure that out. And the thing is, we need a kind of division of labor between people working for GitLab, the company, and the wider community. And people at GitLab, the company, are good in breadth, like good in figuring out what is the additional thing that should be integrated with GitLab and have a first stab at that. Because that's super hard, super complex work. You need UX people, you need people that have an overview, that are in the day-to-day business. And then expanding that thing, adding an incremental feature on top, that's something our wider community is really good at. Like, hey, I have Docker container repository, but I want multiple container types for one project. Great, that's obvious where to place that into the interface. It's a lot of work, but it is much easier to reason about. So the people that work at GitLab focus on breadth over depth. Focus on just biting off additional scope. And then the rest of the community take that land that we tilled and they sow the grains in there to grow new functionality.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I tell it all the time, is that, and that's something that we've seen as well in our company, is that we've shifted our focus several times because of clients that wanted stuff and stuff like that. But and what you get is some kind of a product that is not doing anything particularly well. It's doing kind of everything at once, but not something really, really good. And that's something that I've noticed, especially from my side. That's something that I've noticed in GitLab, is that although it does give you that option to do the kind of continuous integration, the continuous deployment and everything like that, but it still integrates it so nicely that you kind of still have that feeling that you're just using one product, right? It doesn't feel like something is just hanging around there and you're using it.
Yeah, that's why we spend our time. That's why we have a great UX team, UX researchers. And then to get like best in class, it takes time. It takes contribution. So when we started with the CI, it was not a great product. But by now, the latest Forrester review says GitLab CI is better than anything, better than Jenkins, better than Circle CI. It has more functionality and it can do more, and it offers that in a comprehensive way. So it takes a while for the wider community to add that, but it will happen. So now we're now doubling down on this and biting off a lot of scope and then allowing the wider community to participate. And they're stepping up. We're seeing the number of contributions growing very steadily month over month.
Yeah, because that's something that we've used Jenkins in the past, and we've switched over as well. It's mostly, for my part, it was mostly due to things like actually having a file that says, okay, this is what we're going to do in the CI, and I'll also have that under version control, which is great because you can just see what happened. In Jenkins, I had that a little less because you set it up and then you save it, and when you change something, you cannot go back and see what happened, right? Probably there was some kind of plug-in or whatever, but that's something that was a little bit annoying to me, is that, of course, it had a lot of functions and stuff like that, but it's still totally different from what I wanted to have, and that was kind of the integration with my code repository in this sense. So what I wanted to ask about as well is that your competition, of course, there is a lot of competition within your space, but I've seen that GitHub had the announcement that they were going to do private repositories for free and stuff like that. Has that kind of impacted? Has that impacted your business at all? Because you also had, I think you had free private repositories as well, right? At gitlab.com. So
yes.
Has that kind of impacted your space and where you operate?
Yeah, I'm sure that will have an impact. And GitHub is a for version control. It's a great product, and Microsoft is not screwing it up so far. They're doing a great job of being a steward of the product. And they're going to give us some stiff competition in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So far, that competition has worked out great for us because people are much more looking at, okay, I know what GitHub is. What is GitLab? And that's what we need, because the worst for us would be if we get classified as an alternative for GitHub for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah. So because people are now taking notice, and because there's this competition going on, people have a look at our homepage and they're like, wow, it's not just an alternative for GitHub. It's an alternative for the 50 tools we're now stringing together and we're spending a lot of time on. And that is that aha moment that we need. So far, business has been great. This last calendar year, again, we more than doubled our absolute growth rate, our incremental ACV.
Yeah.
So it's we're almost tripling year over year. And now for the 6th year in a row.
That's crazy. Yeah, and that's a good segue into my next question as well. Is that you've been scaling a lot, as you said. You pretty much started like 7 years ago, something like that, right? 7, 8. So. What were some of the challenges that you had while scaling? Because I can imagine scaling from maybe a small group of people to how many employees did you say? It was like 400 and something. Yeah, 450
countries.
Yeah, so I can imagine, and even with the kind of geo thing, because you're working remotely. Then, what were some of the challenges that you had like early on and getting to this number that you're at right now and still growing?
Yeah, I think there were lots of things, but one of the things is we faced skepticism whether our all remote model would work. And we stuck to it, and it turned out it works really well. So we're happy we stuck to that model, and we're not a hybrid company with some people in a headquarters and some people outside of there. I think another thing that worked for us is we write a lot of things down. We have a public handbook. It's over 2,000 pages now. And it really helps to onboard new people. They have to ask way fewer questions. And it also allows people to make changes. Just change the handbook and the process changes. So it allows us to both onboard people better and to stay flexible and have things up for discussion and debate and change.
Yeah. So are you still fully remote then? Is that what you're saying as well?
Correct.
And what I was wondering about there is that we're working remotely as well with our developers, and one thing that I've noticed is something. Of course, company culture is a big thing, especially when you're in the same room. That kind of evolves. How does that? How have you seen that evolve in these kind of years? Working remotely as well. How do you still keep that kind of same culture and stuff like that still alive?
Yeah, so with remote, you have to organize the social connections between people. And that's something we're really deliberate about. We take a design approach to that. So, for example, we do coffee chats where it's totally normal to schedule half an hour with someone without an agenda. We do group conversations every day. Actually, I'm up in a couple of minutes where I have a presentation, but people just ask questions for 25 minutes. We do company calls where you hang out with the same group of people 4 times a week. We do a GitLab contribute where we fly everyone into one location and we spend a lot of time going on excursions together and having an unconference. So we do a lot of things to make those social connections happen. We quickly jump on Zoom calls and things like that. We don't want GitLab to feel distant or lonely. We just want people to be to have a lot of freedom and to have a lot of to be effective.
Cool. And I have still just 2 questions for you before you have to go. How do you kind of see this whole development space and stuff like that changing in the near future, and what your role as GitLab will be in that space as well? How do you see that? How do you see that evolve in the next few years?
I think we're seeing an explosion of complexity. Kubernetes 1, so that's going to be the default layer.
Sure. With
the rise of microservices and all these new best practices like feature flagging and incremental rollouts are going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to a technology called auto remediation, where if there's a vulnerability in your software, GitLab patches it for you and it monitors whether it's still functioning as an app and otherwise reverts it. Things like that are going to become more important.
Yeah, that's sick, because those are kind of the things that we as humans are a little bit blind to in some cases, that we of course have code reviews and stuff like that, but still slips through somehow. That's something that I've noticed as well. So to wrap up, my last question, what are you most proud of since you started?
Well, I think I'm really proud of the team we built. Being all remote, people get to opt into a company. So where almost wherever they are in the world, they can opt into GitLab. And we've been able to, our values of results, of iteration, of transparency, and 3 others, they are now more strong than they were when we started. So I think that combination of a strong culture together with people opting into the organization made for a great team.
Very cool. So where can people find you?
If they Google GitLab, GITLAB, and me personally, I'm SYTSES on Twitter.
Okay, cool. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being here. And of course, for the people listening, you can find the Bits vs. Bytes podcast on bitsvsbytes.com, and also on Twitter, SoundCloud, Instagram. We're all over the place, so it's all Bits vs. Bytes if you're looking for that. And I would like to thank you for listening, and until next time.